Laura Deal, take it away.
Thank you so much. Once, there was a fellow named Jack. Now, I know you've heard stories about Jack, but what those stories don't tell you is that Jack had only one eye. That's right. When he was born, his right eye looked out bright blue into the world, but on the other side, where his eye should have been, there was just a small hollow and a little flap of skin. And Jack's mama, she worried about Jack, how he'd get on in the world looking so different from everybody else. But being Jack's mama, she just loved him extra for all that. And it was Jack's mama that first noticed there was something a little uncanny about Jack. He was still a little boy, and he said to her, "Mama, Widow Wilson has some extra eggs, and she's grateful for that pie you made last week." And Mama just looked at him. And then there was a knock at the door, and there was Widow Wilson with a basket of eggs. "Oh, I had some extra, and I sure am grateful for that pie you gave me last week." Or another time, "Mama, neighbor George needs to borrow some firewood, but it's okay. He'll pay us back tomorrow." And again, there was a knock at the door, and there was George. "Oh, could I please borrow a couple sticks of firewood? I'll bring you more tomorrow." Well, Mama sat Jack down. She said, "Jack, you might not want to tell everybody about what you can do." He said, "Why, Mama? Does it scare them?" She said, "Well, yeah, Jack, it might scare them." "Well, Mama, I got my blue eye, looks on the world just like yours, and then I got this one, scares people. We'll call it my boo eye. And Mama, my boo eye's got rules of its own." So Mama knew there wasn't anything she'd be able to do about Jack. And it wasn't too long after that Widow Wilson was over having a cup of tea, and Jack, he was working on his numbers and letters on a slate at the table, and he looked up and said, "Mama, neighbor George, his cows got out of the pasture. We got to go help." Well, you couldn't see George's pasture or his cows from where they were sitting, but when they went outside, there came George. "Oh, my cattle got out. Would you come and help?" Well, now, Widow Wilson, she didn't tell anyone, not for a while. She liked Jack, and she liked Jack's mama, but oh, a secret like that, that's too good to keep. And pretty soon, everyone in town knew that if you took Jack a few copper coins or a loaf of bread, why, he'd take a look with his boo eye, and he'd tell you what the weather might be like in a few days' time, or where that thing you lost might be found, or whether this young couple'd be happy if they got married. And by the time Jack was nearly grown, word had spread to the bigger town nearby. And one day there was a knock at the door, and when Jack opened it, well, he recognized the man there. He knew him by reputation. His name was Mr. Clay. And Mr. Clay, he was the kind of fellow who liked to trick people out of their money and cheat people out of their land. And Jack, he took a look at Mr. Clay's fine clothes with his blue eye. And he took a look at Mr. Clay's heart with his boo eye, and he didn't much like what he saw either place. But you know, the boo eye, it's got rules of its own, so Jack invited him in. And Mr. Clay, he set a big purse of gold on the table. He said, "Jack, I want to know how to invest this gold. Well, I'd like it to be worth more than all my land." And Jack said, "And what will you give me if I take a look for you?" And Mr. Clay, he pulled from his coat pocket a silver coin. Now, it's true, in all the time that Jack had ever looked with his boo eye, he'd never been paid that much money. But a silver coin from Mr. Clay, well, that was an insult, intended and taken. And Jack, he took a look. And he said, "Mr. Clay, I have seen what you can do. Now, I don't guarantee you're going to like all the details of how this works out, but you know, on your daddy's land, there's that hawthorn tree." "Oh, yeah, my daddy, he was superstitious, wouldn't let anybody touch that tree, said it was a fairy tree. But you know, I've been thinking about clearing that land. It's good land up there." "Oh, Mr. Clay, you'd be wise to listen to what your daddy says, because there is magic in that tree, and if you dig down in those roots and you bury that bag of gold, why, in the morning, your wish will come true." Oh, I know your type. You just want to go and dig that gold up overnight. Oh, Mr. Clay, you can always sit vigil, can't you? So Mr. Clay, he took his bag of gold and he went home. He got himself a nice, sharp shovel. He got a blanket and some food, and he went out to that hawthorn tree. Now, nobody had touched it for years and years. So to get to where he thought he ought to bury that gold, he had to break a couple of branches. And then when he dug, well, that shovel, it cut right through some of the tender little rootlets of that tree. He buried the bag of gold there and he covered it all up, sat himself down on it, leaned against the tree, wrapped himself in his blanket, ate his supper, and when night fell, he fell asleep. And when he next woke, the air was pressing heavy on him. And before he could even really remember where he was, boom, lightning struck his house half a mile away, and then boom, lightning struck his barn. He couldn't even stand up before boom, lightning struck that hawthorn tree. It electrocuted Mr. Clay right where he lay. And that fire that from that lightning, it ran down that tree. It caught all the grasses and grains of that land. It burned hot and it burned fast, right to the edges of the land that Mr. Clay had stolen from his neighbors. And then the rains came and put that fire out. And it's true, in the morning, you could have bought that land 70 times over for the gold in that bag. There wasn't anybody wanted to go out on that cursed landscape. Not even Jack. But you know the Boo-eye and its rules. Well, he waited 3 days. And then he made his way across that charred field. He found the still living tree and the sad remains of Mr. Clay. He found the melted head of Mr. Clay's shovel. And with a prayer to the fair folk, and a prayer to his mama's God, and a little prayer to his Boo-eye, he dug down and he brought up that bag of gold. He took one coin out and reburied it there in tribute and apology. And then he took the rest of the gold with him, because you see, when he had seen what might happen to Mr. Clay, he had also seen all the people that Mr. Clay had cheated and stolen from. Now he knew they'd sort out the land on their own, but he went to Mr. Clay's town and he went house to house to house, 1 gold coin here, 3 gold coins there, paying people back from what they lost. And when he only had 6 coins left in that bag, there was one person left to see. She was a rich widow. She'd been well able to afford the loss of those coins. And of course, she had heard what Jack was up to. She invited him in for a cup of tea and asked for the story from his own lips. And when he finished telling her, she said, "Jack, that was a hard thing you did. I want you to keep those coins and get something nice for you and your mama." So Jack, he thanked her kindly and he took those coins home, and well, they lasted him and his mama a long time, as they tended to replenish in the bag if they weren't spent too quickly. And after that, well, Jack never again took a copper coin or a loaf of bread to take a look with his Boo-eye. No, he would ask only for a story. And if the person had time, well, Jack would tell a story of his own, often this one that I've just told you. Thanks.